that means that the first pick in the 2022 NBA draft goes to the Orlando Magic.
The Orlando Magic have been awarded the first pick in the 2022 draft. They will pick number 1 for the...
What's up, YouTube and NBA fans? I got a special guest here with me today to talk about the Orlando Magic. It is not Zay. He is a fantastic draft analyst, and he's also an Orlando Magic fan. So it didn't make sense to try and reach out to anyone else but him to be a guest on this show to talk about the Magic's options coming into this 2022 draft. Zay, what you got to say to the people, man? Introduce yourself, and I want to let you take the floor.
Everything you said is pretty much right. I do draft stuff on Twitter for the most part. I'm going to start doing some more videos and writing, probably on Patreon or something like that. Who knows? The work's going to be free though. But pretty much do draft stuff. Magic fan, like you said. I've been doing this for a couple years now, and I think I have a decent grasp on this kind of stuff. So I don't know. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. We're going to dive straight into things. Before we even really touch on anything about the draft, I really just want to kind of contextualize the state of the Orlando Magic franchise these past, 10 years, because that's going to kind of make sense about like how we've gotten to this point, the significance of it all, and, just what this means for the franchise. And really that conversation has to start with the Dwight Howard trade, because that was, the last great first overall pick, big man that the Magic had that changed the direction of the franchise, and Shaq before him. And with the Dwight Howard trade, the Magic didn't really come out on top. No team actually did from that Dwight Howard trade. But the Magic's record since then has been 275 wins, 526 losses. There's been 6 different head coaches. And that's been over 2 different front offices as well, and really only 2 playoff appearances to speak for from that time period as well. So a lot of downs. There were some ups, absolutely, as well, but it's been a tumultuous time period for Magic fans for sure.
Right.
Yeah, and so that's kind of just the backdrop as we get into this draft. With an organization that has wanted to succeed and wanted to make the playoffs and be that 7th, 8th seed. And really, they've only managed to do it twice. And because of that, they've really messed up their lottery odds. But, the last year, they finally pulled the trigger. They moved Nikola Vucevic, they moved Evan Fournier, and we're in a rebuild, thank God. Yeah. I was hoping you guys ended up with the first overall pick last year and got Cade, but, you got it this year, and it's only right because this year at the top of the draft, there are nothing but bigs.
Tradition.
So, before we even get into the draft still, I just want to go over like what you view as reasons to be optimistic about on this young Magic team. What are the young players that you think will really fit well with whoever this first overall pick is going to end up being?
For the most part, I feel like we really can't go wrong because of our current roster construction post the Vooch trade. Because we ended up with Wendell and Franz, who are both very versatile players who don't need the ball in their hands. Franz did show that he could do a lot with the ball in his hands, which is something I'm very interested in seeing moving forward. But that kind of goes into what we're going to talk about later and some of our draft choices and how that impacts different players on the roster. I'm not sure if you know, but if anyone listening, huge Cole Anthony fan here ever since high school. He did have a rocky year at UNC, but he's starting to put things together a little bit for the Magic, and I'm a fan of him. Jalen Suggs, I was a little bit less high on coming in, but at the same time, I still acknowledge that his upside is pretty awesome. Drew Holiday type if you're into comparisons or whatever. Anyone else? Mo might not be with us very long. We might be drafting his replacement as well. So who knows how long he stays here.
Very true.
He's okay. Okay backup so far, at least. I think he might have grown to a starter in this league, but if he does, probably not for us. Who else is on it? RJ Hampton. He might get pushed out because of all of the stuff that we have coming in. But he's pretty good though. He's improved a ton on his shot, point of attack defense, that kind of stuff. And Markel, I'm huge on. I love Markel, my favorite prospect ever. Sucks what happened to him, but I still have a lot of faith in him. Oh yeah, pretty much. Yeah, those are reasons to be optimistic. I feel like we have a young roster who, while we didn't win very many games, we have a whole bunch of interesting pieces, and we're waiting to see how they fit together.
Yeah, there are a ton of. I was even about to mention there are a ton of young names on this roster, and it's like, there's Hampton. I'm a huge Cole Anthony fan as well. The fact he slid to y'all, I thought was nuts. So there's a name that I'm surprised. I was interested to see if you would mention, really, and that's Jonathan Isaac, because he's this all defensive level player, potential defensive player of the year, really, for what he does on the perimeter, what he can kind of do. Switching, what he can still offer as a rim protector. He's truly like really a special defensive player. But I think for some Magic fans, he's a headache off the court with, the statements and political leanings that he has, to put it. Yeah. So just where are you on Jonathan Isaac in general?
I mean, the off-court stuff, to me, it matters, like, as a fan, because I don't want to, like, see that kind of stuff on the timeline. It's not a good representation of that's not really my job or whatever. It's what it does on the basketball court. And he hasn't been on the basketball court in like 2 years. So it's just sort of like, he's sort of an afterthought for me and most Magic fans. Although when he does return, I'm fairly confident that he might not be 100%, but I'm pretty sure he's going to be up to like 80% or something like that. He'll be I can't talk. He'll be ready to impact the game on the defensive end. His offense might just be completely toast sort of at this point, because it was already sort of, you wanted a lot more from him on offense. And now that he's taken 2 years off, I can't really see the offense being great. But as you said, only like on the defensive end, maybe only he and Giannis can do what he does. And maybe a guy that we draft potentially. So other than that, Jonathan Isaac, I don't really have him. When I'm thinking about roster construction and stuff like that, I don't really include him into the plans, because it's just sort of like, we don't know what he's going to come back like. We haven't seen him in 2 years. Who knows, So I don't really include him into my plans. But obviously, if he does come back fine, then that's a defensive player of the year candidate stacked on top of everything we already have. So we're playing with house money there.
True. That's a fair viewpoint. Transitioning into some of the draft stuff, just with everything that we've talked about on the Orlando Magic's roster, what do you think that they need if they were making this first overall pick, really just based on need? What are those roster deficiencies currently there for you?
3-point shooting. We're near the bottom of the league in 3-point shooting. Although I do think that all three prospects offer obviously varying levels of shooting. Obviously, Jabari is going to offer us a lot more than Chet or Paolo. If those are your top three guys on your board or whatever, he's going to offer that a lot more. Although I do think all three have a very high chance of being high-level shooters. Jabari is a shoe-in for it. Paolo, I think he's going to be a very good shooter. Nothing crazy. I think he's going to be very good, and I think Chet's going to be a solid shooter as well. So I think that concern kind of gets helped by all three. That's one thing. I think we need some shot creation, because outside of Cole, we don't really have any guys that I can see us going to down the stretch or in the playoffs or something like that could go, sometimes in the playoffs, you just need someone who can go get you a bucket straight up. You can do all that scheming if you want to, but sometimes you just need a bucket. So that's a concern that I have, because only Cole can do that on our roster right now. I guess Franz can do it as well now. And maybe Markel, but he's so limited in what he can do because of the things that have happened to him, that I'm not really sure how that's going to translate to a playoff context. Let me see. And I also don't think that we have, for the shot creation or whatever, I don't think we have to get that right now, because like I said, I do want to see Franz get some more on-ball usage, like he did in December with all of our guards out, because all of our guards were literally injured, and he kind of had to take that on-ball role. I'm sorry if you hear my dog, but he had to take that on-ball role. He was kind of awesome in it, and he has wiring concerns coming into the league, to where he's sort of passive, or at least he was passive and willing to play a role when he didn't necessarily need to do that or have to do that. And with all the ball handlers we're bringing in right now, I mean, all the ball handlers that we have, plus Fultz coming back, adding another cook in the kitchen might push Franz down the totem pole, and he's willing to do that, which is my problem. He's just so comfortable sitting in the backseat when he should be a driver in our offense. So I'm kind of worried about that if we do add a shot creator, but that's not something I'm changing my board for. Yeah, pretty much. Those are the things that I think that we need or could use. Not saying that we couldn't use. Another thing in identity. I feel like we have a whole bunch of interesting pieces, but it's sort of like a whole bunch of guys that don't necessarily fit that well together. Like, where are we going is sort of what I'm wondering. So like we need to, first of all, we need to consolidate eventually, which is with our guards. And I also think we just need to pick a direction. Like, where are we going to be? Are we going to be this defensive team that's going to, you guys are going to score 70 points and we're going to score 90 and that's how we're going to win every game, or what? And the funny thing is, when I was writing out the notes for this specific part, I was like, wow, out of the top 3 prospects, all of them answer one of those questions. Paolo, shot creator; Jabari, 3-point shooting; Chet, an identity, because at that point we're going all into the defense and stuff like that. So yeah, those are the needs, I'd say. Sorry, I'm a bit long-winded.
No, I mean, that was great, because I think that you really just nailed why it was so great to land the first pick, because you have, like, the roster has deficiencies that this first overall pick can resolve. And I'm kind of curious where you stand, and, other Magic fans can comment and let me know where they stand on this. But, what are your thoughts on potentially trading down out of that first overall pick, maybe getting a few other assets in return as well, a future pick in next year's draft, which is expected to be loaded, and, moving down to just like 2, 3, or 4, something like that, maybe still in the top 5?
I wouldn't trade down. I just take the number 1 pick and get your guy. But let's just say, for example, let's say Paulo's your guy or whatever, and for a fact that OKC is going to take Chet number 1. Of course, you should, trade down 1 pick, get your guy at the second pick and get some assets or whatever. But I just feel like we're leaning too much on what someone else is going to do. We have the first pick. All 3 of these guys fit us, some more than others. And I just feel as though we should just take the pick. I don't think we should trade down. Okay. We don't really need any other like young assets either. We're kind of loaded there.
True. Yeah, they're positionally kind of a logjam as well. Chuma, kind of a tweener forward. There's Wendell and, whoever you're adding as well. So I see what you're saying there. Just kind of take your guy at number 1. Another thing I'm curious about, who do you think is the best out of these top 3?
Paolo.
Just the definitive. So you say, because I've kind of seen a lot of Magic fans lean that way, where they say, Paolo's their guy out of all 3.
Really? Because I've seen literally the opposite. I've seen like Jabari be number 1, which is mind-boggling to me. And Jabari's a great prospect, but that's mind-boggling to me to have Jabari 1. And then second, I see Chet a lot because of the obvious, relationship that he has with Suggs, and our front office likes guys with the length and all that other stuff. So he fits that as well. So I've seen those 2 more than Paolo. It almost feels like to me that Paolo was getting like pushed down almost for like crazy reasons, almost that he's getting pushed down to this 3rd spot. And I just haven't heard any good justification as to why. It just seems like it's those 2, Chet, Jabari. And then there's like a small gap, and then there's Paolo for most people. I'm just like, huh? This guy just had a great season.
I'm interested. Let's talk about Paolo a little bit more then, because it sounds like you think he's in contention for that first selection a little more than consensus. So we can get right into Paolo, because I've heard him be billed as potentially the most NBA ready of these top 3. I want to just ask, do you kind of agree with that sentiment, and what's his most impactful skill from day 1?
NBA ready day 1, that's sort of difficult for me, because what Jabari offers: point of attack, defense, shooting. That stuff's going to be valuable from day 1. So I don't know if Paolo's necessarily the most NBA ready right now. I think people say that because of his frame, and is polished right now, but I don't think he's necessarily most NBA ready. I think Jabari is probably going to come in and have an immediate impact on defense and as a shooter. But Paolo, his best attributes to me are his passing, rim pressure, and handling. Because you have to think about it. Back to that point I was saying earlier, how I just feel like people are like glossing over how insane of a prospect he is. Let's think about it here. This is a 6'10", 250-pound guy who's coming out of college. You remember Jason Tatum coming out of college, how polished he was.
Mm-hmm.
This is someone this isn't even a comparison, but he's coming out more polished than Jason Tatum did at the same stage. He can handle the ball extremely well and generates rim pressure. He isn't selfish, passes the ball extremely well. He's going to be able to punish mismatches, footwork. He can function as a cog in the offense. And for most guys, this skill, you'll see that they're ridiculously in love with their jumper. Paolo isn't. Not to say that he doesn't shoot them, because he does, but I feel like it's more of a even distribution of rim attempts and, jumpers than most guys with his level of polish and skill at this age. He can shoot too. I don't understand why people are like kind of billing him as a non-shooter or a poor one. 33% from three, that's not great, but for the kind of attempts that he was taking, and I think he got up a decent amount of volume this season, I'm very optimistic. I think he has a positive shooting projection, if anything, whereas most people are saying, or at least it seems like they feel as though he has a negative one. He has a good touch too, so like I don't really see why they don't think he can. And the defense stuff, that's one big concern people have with him, is that defense. But every concern I have isn't about, I'm hearing isn't about inability. It's more so about consistency. And that's a problem I'd rather be that way than vice versa, especially with the, what's the word I'm looking for? With the personnel that we have on the Magic, we can, make up for some of those deficiencies that he has there.
I'm interested to talk about those kind of defensive deficiencies. When people say he's, not necessarily a strong defender, in your opinion, what's his biggest area of growth on that side of the floor? Is it, being more engaged at the point of attack? Does he fall asleep off ball? Or, is it, something else with him?
I think it's a little bit of everything. So like, first of all, Paulo's huge. He's 250 pounds, like I just said. He gained a lot of muscle and I guess slightly fat, So it's harder to move when you're 6'10", first of all. And then when you pack on weight like that, it is harder to move on the perimeter. I do think when he is locked in, he's a serviceable, like, point of attack defender. Off ball, he does follow. He has lapses sometimes, but Paolo in the past has been a good off ball defender. I think that the year that he had off because of COVID, I think that impacts a lot of guys in ways that we didn't really account for as scouts, because these guys literally, besides Jabari, because he South, how they do with the mandates and stuff like that with the vaccine. They didn't really care. You could go play basketball. But Paolo and most of these other prospects, they had to sit out that whole year pretty much from competitive basketball. So their processing is catching up on both ends of the ball, which is another point I had for Paolo. So on that end, I feel like he's just going to grade out as being fine, whereas most people think he's going to be some huge negative or whatever. And I just don't see that. I don't see where you're getting that from the state.
One of the things you mentioned about him is his size, and it pops out in the tape of him. Like, he looks huge, and a guy at that size, I've also seen some John Collins, Blake Griffin comps for him, which immediately makes me ask the question, can he play the five? What's the answer to that in your eyes?
I don't think you want him to, but like, if there's a lineup where he is the five or whatever, I don't think it'd be anything terrible. I think his defense for a five is a little bit concerning if you're relying on it heavily, because like, he's not a five defender. He's 6'10", but he's not huge. And just stuff like that. I don't really think that he'll do very well as a five defender, but if you played in spots, or maybe he's your five on offense, he's your five on offense, and on defense, he plays more of a, four role or something like that, that could work. And we have the personnel to do something like that. So that's another reason why I'm kind of intrigued on having him there.
Yeah, I mainly asked that question because, as we watch in the playoffs, a lot of teams are finding success sizing down. And I think someone with his frame, if he can successfully play the five, I think that can be really dangerous for playoff matchup, because, imagine him against, let's say a team like the Mavericks, where they're sizing down, they're going to maybe a guy like Maxey, and someone with Paolo's size and handle, like, he can take bigs off off the floor.
Right.
He's taking them off the dribble, and if they're putting a guy that's too small, he puts them in the post, and he's passing all over the floor. So
right.
I'd really like to see if he can play the 5, and I think that'd be an interesting thing for his development, especially because in Orlando they kind of have that option to play him as the 5 offensively, and then Wendell's really your main rim protector essentially. So I think that's something that could maybe work in Orlando.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something, because we do have the pieces to insulate something like that, especially if Jonathan Isaac ever does play basketball again. So Paolo would just be joining the room with other guys. I'm just like, well, I want to see what he does at center. Franz, when he was coming out, I was like, man, I kind of want to see what he does at center. Or the 5 for a little bit. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah. One of the things that I've heard, I don't know if this is necessarily a concern, but I've also heard Paolo described as a jack of all trades, but a master of none. Right. Do you agree with that label? Do you think it kind of applies to him?
Sort of. When I use that label, I usually use it for people who don't stand out at anything. They're just okay at a whole bunch of stuff, where that's not the case for Paolo. Paolo's very good at passing. He's a very good, like I said, handler. He gets downhill as well as anyone who isn't a guard or something in this class. So like, I wouldn't necessarily put that label on him, but he does do a lot of things well, which for whatever reason seems to be limiting his upside for some people. They did the same thing with Luka. They did the same thing with Cade, where it's just, they're so good at so many things. They just put this imaginary ceiling on them for whatever reason. And that it's sort of like, why would you not bet on a young guy who's good at everything already versus someone who's bad at a whole bunch of stuff, but he's good at 1 or 2 things, or you're expecting him to catch up at other stuff? That doesn't really make sense to me, like, logically.
Yeah, I think you've made me a little more interested in Paolo than I was coming into this. I do want to pivot back to Chet, because mostly where I'm seeing he's getting more of the consensus top first overall pick. So I'm just kind of assuming he may end up being the pick. And one of the resounding narratives about Chet all season, and really, since he's been in high school, is his frame. So I just want to ask at the top of this, what concerns, if any, about his frame are justified?
I mean, I feel like they are justified if you're projecting him to be like a full-time center, but like, that's not necessary. I feel like people are forcing him into that for whatever reason. That's just not what he is right now. And that's not to say he'll never be that. But if you do pack all that weight on him to become center size, don't you fear that he'll lose a little bit of that mobility or whatever that he does have? I don't know. There's just various pluses and minuses for those things. But I do think that Chet is best used in that Giannis, I guess even like Evan Mobley sort of 4 role, to where they're doing a lot more roaming and basically cleaning up stuff on the back line and just being menaces in general. Jonathan Isaac does that kind of stuff too. So like, I feel like that's the role that he'd be best in. Yeah. But I feel like people are pushing him to be the full-time 5. And that's, not yet to be seen, I guess.
Yeah. Cause I've got to say, from, a non-draft person perspective, I don't watch college ball. I just kind of watch tape occasionally, especially around draft season. I'm, looking for mock drafts. I'm looking for big boards and things that I could look into. But from an amateur perspective, Chet definitely seems like the most boomer bust prospect, because from the tape, you still see the defensive upside with him. Like, he was a fantastic rim protector, averaged essentially 4 blocks per game, and looks fairly mobile protecting on the perimeter as well. So there's that upside. But offensively, I think the tape wasn't as exciting. The numbers don't pop out as much. And, so I just want to ask, how do you see his jump shooting and his ball handling translating at the next level? Because I'm also hearing from draft people that I trust and like, that he had opportunities that like weren't necessarily available to him on that roster, and he wasn't really able to showcase his full game.
I think that's true to an extent, but not specifically in those areas. Like, I think the ball handling, he could have showed it off a little bit more, but I have always been a little bit lower on his ball handling than most, because you see the clips where he's crossing up Stephen Curry or whatever, but that's not real life. If that makes any sense. That's not what he does. Yeah, so the ball handling is intriguing. I have a note from when I was watching him at U19 before the season. He got a screen from somebody. I forget who it was, because he's not going to be able to create space with his handle. That's just not the kind of handler he is right now. So using a screen, especially if we have Wendell, it keeps going back to the Magic. We have Wendell who could screen for him. And in this case, he took the screen into a pull-up jumper. Actually, no, he took that screen into he went downhill and did a sidestep three. I mean, was it a three? It was against Canada. I don't know. I don't remember, but you get the point. So he pairs well with bigs. So I feel like maybe if you were to run a 2-big thing and maybe try to get him some actions with a different big, his handle could be used. But off the standstill or in isolation or something like that, I don't think it's really a thing that he's going to be able to utilize. You asked about the shooting. I think Chet's going to be a fine shooter. I don't think he's going to be anything crazy. He's at 39%. He's shooting above 70% from the free throw line, has great touch indicators. So I don't see why he wouldn't shoot. He's always shot. He's not afraid to shoot either, which is another thing I'm pretty big on. Hesitancy. He's not a hesitant shooter either. In transition, you'll see him do the pull-ups and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm pretty high on Chet as a shooter and as a ball handler, less so than some other people.
I'm actually, really surprised that you shared some of my same concerns about him as a ball handler. And I think I kind of just have these, a pessimistic view of big men prospect for this reason, especially when part of the sales pitch on them is, hey, look at this guy as a ball handler. I'm like, what 7-footer, like what guy at his size are we really seeing in the league handle the ball and really get those opportunities? It's essentially just Giannis, Joel Embiid to a degree, but even he's like more of a bulkier guy and a weird specimen of his own right. But like the guys who get pitched is like, I saw these same kind of clips of a Pokuchevsky, of a Thon Maker, of all types of these big lanky prospects. What's different about Chet that his ball handling is actually going to work at this level? Because when you're that size, I just think it's hard to really build in the counters with your handle to spend large amounts of times on the perimeter.
I feel like Chet can spend most of his time on the perimeter. Well, he will, because of what he is as a shooter. It's not like he can't attack closeouts or anything like that, but I just don't see the creator upside. Because, people say stuff like he's next KD or something like that. And I'm just like, excuse me. So, yeah, no, I don't see that. But I can see him attacking closeouts and stuff like that. Most of his value is probably going to come on the perimeter from a scoring perspective. You said something earlier that kind of caught my attention when you were saying that his biggest, you said something along the lines like his biggest offensive attributes that people are talking about is the handle and the shooting and all that other stuff. I feel like he's underrated as a passer as well. He's not like Paolo. He's not going to be a hub of your offense to where you can run it through like a Julius Randle or a Domantas Sabonis or something. Those kind of bigs. But he's more of a connective piece big to where if you give him the ball and the defense is shifted, he's going to make the right play, or if Franz cuts or something and he's open like he usually is, Chet can find him and stuff like that. It's more of a connective thing rather than you give him the ball to run offense through him. But we didn't necessarily get to see him in the short roll or anything really in the pick and roll at Gonzaga because of the kind of offense that they run. So I don't really know how Chet looks as a pick and roll like passer or anything like that. I'm sure it's fine because he's just that level of a prospect. He's a very smart player. And like I said, the offensive passing flashes were apparent at Gonzaga. So I'm very high on Chet's passing. I think he's a very good off-ball player. He moves a ton off-ball. Back to that U19 tape, he played off of Kenneth Lofton, who is a very good post player. Very weird player. If you ever have time, look him up. He's very odd, to say the least, as a basketball player. But he was playing off of him. Once he started moving off ball, like it really opened up a lot for that U19 USA team. He's a very good cutter, and yeah, I feel like he'll play very well off of like a Markel or Wendell or Franz. So
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned his passing because in my research about Chet as well, I did hear and see a lot about the high-low passing that he has. And
Hmm.
Orlando is a team that, hey, Wendell is a solid passer as well. So that's a nice connection. I do think the fit would be there.
Hmm.
What team in the top three do you think would be best for Chet and his development? Like, where does he become the best version of himself in the among the top three?
Us, of course, because I feel as though he fits very well on defensive end. Because first of all, he doesn't have to be our primary protector off the jump. Like I said, I'm obsessed with him in that Giannis role, and with us having Wendell, who can play the five, who has played the five for a good amount of his career, um, I feel as though that slots him perfectly in that role. I feel like he fits in well because we have a guard like Markelle Fultz who can get downhill and is a very, very good playmaker. So a lot of these things, so Chet wouldn't have to create nearly as much as he may at other places. I mean, you can say the same thing at OKC because they have Shea and stuff like that. But he does fit well. He does pair well with one of our guards, Markelle. Probably the same kind of fit that Wendell has, or a similar fit to what Wendell has with Markelle. Something that I've been thinking about for a while is the Boston Cleveland style two big starting lineup because Boston has Al Horford and Robert Williams, and Cleveland has Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, and both of those teams have been stellar defensively this season, especially in the postseason with Boston as well. And then you're pairing that with Jason Tatum as their three. For us, that would be Franz. So that's three high-level front court defenders. Cleveland doesn't necessarily have that because they're starting Larry Markkinen, which leaves a lot to be wanted on the defensive end. Although he's been pretty decent this season, but not a defender. And we did see Mo and Wendell. I'm not going to say we saw it work, but we saw them play together, and it didn't look terrible at all points in time, which is it's encouraging because I think people are going to take this the wrong way when they hear this, but I kind of see Chet as like Mo sort of because of their broad similarities, not because they're actually similar at all, but because Mo shoots, protects the rim, Chet shoots, protects the rim, passes, and does all that other stuff. But broadly, they're similar players. So I feel like if the fit worked okay with Mo, it'll work great with Chet because he's everything Mo is, but amplified. So I feel like those two would work very well together. Because I'm also a believer that basketball is a sport that's played inside out in the sense that like unassisted rim attempts are probably the most valuable shot in basketball for an offense because of what they generate. Because if you collapse the defense, getting paint attempts usually means you blow by your guy or you have a mismatch or something in the post in today's league. So getting those usually cause the defense to freak out, which gets you better opportunities for your people on the perimeter. And we have so many guys on our perimeter who just know what to do with the ball when the defense is scrambled. Like Franz is going to feast off of stuff like that, off of cuts or making passes. Because when the defense scrambles, they make poor decisions. And we have a whole bunch of smart players who know how to take advantage of that sort of thing. So I've kind of got off. I went on a tangent. I kind of got off track with what I was talking about. But with that being the most valuable shot in basketball, that was just on offense. Fuck, can we restart this part?
No, I mean,
got off track.
I think you still make a great point of why Chet is a great fit in Orlando, paired next to Wendell. Like we've already talked about the passing element of Chet's games, the high lows. Wendell's obviously a solid passer as well, and Franz as well. Pick and roll with those guys. We can see a little more from Chet potentially as a short roll passer. And I'm even happy you mentioned the kind of broad similarities between Bamba and Chet because, you can at least have a framework for some plays and some usage for Chet right out the gate because you have, a similar context for, player with a similar build. So I think all that goes into it.
I'm sorry. I remember where I was going with the Boston Cleveland. I went to the offense. It was more so the defensive thing. So if rim pressure or whatever is basically the most important shot in basketball, having two high level rim protectors like Wendell and having a secondary who can play that Giannis role like Chet, essentially it puts a lid on the rim. People aren't going to want to come into the same thing that happens with Rudy Gobert. People aren't going to want to come into the paint. And at that point, especially we add Franz and maybe JI to that mix because they fill up holes very well, and we might need that because of our guards' defensive weaknesses. Like
True.
Cole is not a great defender right now. He tries very hard, but he's not a great defender. And Suggs is going to be a great defender, but his defensive style sometimes leads to him getting beaten because he likes to gamble and, do stuff like that. So there's going to be holes that'll need sealing. So Franz and JI can help doing that. And my friend of mine named Chip, his Twitter is ChipJNBA. Go follow him. He made a good point about in the playoffs, shutting down the paint could lead to wins due to forcing teams to have to rely on their outside shooting because the paint's going to be, taken away from them.
Mhm.
And how shooting, as we all know, relying on your shooting like that isn't a reliable strategy for most teams. You could probably pick up a win or two. At least this is what he said. You'd probably pick up a win or two due to shooting variance or whatever. And I found that very interesting because it makes sense. It's just like if you're relying on all of your jumpers, shooting comes and goes. Like some days you have it, some days you just don't. And if you're taking a high volume of them, it's going to vary. One game you're going to be off just because Chet, Wendell, Franz shut down the paint. Literally, you couldn't get layups. You couldn't force bad defensive rotations and stuff like that. So
and you'll hear the announcer say it all the time. Like sometimes a player got going because they got to see some easy ones go in. So not allowing that can keep offenses out of rhythm as well. So I think especially if you have like a good solid floor offensively as a team, that makes you really hard to beat if you're playing defense at that level. A healthy Magic team with Chet would be a scary defensive outfit.
Right. And the last, I guess this could kind of bridge to our next guy, which is Jabari, because I think defense, this is a philosophical point that my friend Henry Ward discusses on his podcast about shrinking the floor, which is something I agree with as well, because I feel like the goal of a modern NBA defense should be to shrink the floor through positional size and length and mobility. So for us, that would be Franz, Wendell, potentially Chet, Chuma, JI, if he ever plays basketball again, and maybe Jabari, because he's extremely mobile. He's great at the point of attack. He might be the best point of attack defender in the class, to be completely honest with you. Having those guys with size, length, and mobility gives offenses much less space to operate. Windows close even faster than usual because of the length, especially if we get a guy like Chet, because Franz, Chet, Wendell, and JI, they're so smart, and Chuma, they're so smart on the defensive end that things close up for them anyway. But then when you add that length on top of that, like stuff, your windows are super tight. They're already tight in the NBA, but they're super tight if you're playing against guys like that. And all these guys communicate well, and they're highly cerebral. So I feel like it's going to be a cohesive unit if we do draft Chet or Jabari. There won't be very many mismatches on switches either, especially if we do draft Jabari. It's sort of like the Raptor style mixed with the Cavs style in a way, because like the Raptors, you see they have 10, 6'9" guys who can move very well for their position and are long. And the thing that they have is most of their guys have some sort of positional strength so that they can play down that we don't necessarily have right now. But I think it's a mix of those two that we could have, where it's just like, man, we have a whole bunch of huge guys flying around. These passing lanes are getting jumped. Your windows are small. It's just going to be hell to play us eventually.
Yeah, I'm very happy you brought up Jabari. He's the guy I want to talk about next, because out of these top three, he's my personal favorite. Just
really
because, I mean, like I said, I'm not a draft guy, so it's not like I've been watching him play in college. But from a tape standpoint, he's a tough shot maker for sure, and so that's just kind of appealing for sure. The jump shot looks fascinating with him. I think defensively, I'm very interested by what he can do, and just like the mold that he has really fits kind of like a Jaren Jackson, Anthony Davis, where I really kind of enjoy that type of player. So archetype wise, I think, I'm confused why more people don't have him number one. So that's just kind of my first question. In your opinion, what's holding people back from having this guy number one? Is it just those other two are maybe, half a tier better, or are there some deficiencies in his game that I'm not seeing?
I think it's a little bit of both. I feel like he does have a lot of deficiencies that people sort of gloss over, and I do think Paolo and Chet are just a tier above. But that's not saying, because I don't want this to come off as hating, because I do think Jabari is a very, very good prospect. I just think that there's there's for lack of better words, there's a level to the shit. So like there's going to be, because one of the points you said was that he was a good tough shot maker. But for me, when I look at the tape, or even if you go look at highlights, everything is tough. He has no consistent way of generating space. He has no consistent way of generating like easy offense. Like, where do the easy buckets come for Jabari? Everything is super contested. He's a shooter, of course, so like off ball, he plays well off ball, so like he could derive value off of that. But if you're for a number one pick and the projecting and the stuff that people are projecting as a ball handler, it's just not there for me. His handle is so far away, and people tend to kind of say he's young, he can improve this and the fourth. But have you ever looked at people? Like, I like to look at things through a historical lens. Like, who have we really seen go from a non-handler really to go to one that's a shot creator, like a legit shot creator that you're running your offense through? You got Paul George, but first of all, Paul George is one of the biggest developmental anomalies in NBA history as far as the handle is concerned. And second of all, his handle was even better than Jabari's at Fresno State. So like, even if Jabari were to take a huge leap, he'd still not be like Paul George, which is one of the comparisons that he's getting. It's just so hard to improve your handle to it's easy to improve a handle up to a certain point. Like, I feel as though you're not going to add wiggle, or if you guys get what I mean when I say wiggle. I don't think you're going to be able to add that, or like real space creation chops to someone after a certain point, because it's so difficult. It's one of the hardest things to develop in basketball, which is another reason why I'm higher on Paolo than Jabari, because shooting is one of the easier things to teach, especially catch and shoot shooting, which is one of the issues that I have seen with Paolo. That's one of the easier things to teach. We see guys like Brook Lopez and guys who are non-shooters go into becoming good catch and shoot players. Apollo's a decent off the dribble shooter already. So that's why I said I'm optimistic on his shooting outlook. Jabari is not a very good ball handler, like I said, not a very good passer either. It's almost, I wouldn't say he has like bad tunnel vision, but he is very bad at passing. When he does pass and they look good, when you look at the windows, they're usually extremely open. Do you hear all of this? I'm sorry.
That's completely fine.
My dog is literally running around like a crazy person. But yeah, Jabari's passing leaves me wanting more a lot of the time. I feel like he's closer to being just like a really, really good role guy versus the star that Chet or Paolo can be. Chet being a star on the defensive end with some offensive chops, and Paolo being an offensive superstar who can survive on defense. I think Jabari fits more into a like, you're looking like the optimal outcome for him is like Rashard Lewis, probably. Like, I know that's a bit of a played out comparison, but I think it's true. Like, if you're at best, you're looking at that with him. And I don't necessarily I don't know. I just prefer the upside of the other two to Jabari. Yeah, I feel as though that it's been opposite for most people, though, because they see the highlights. They see him shooting over people. They see him sort of dribbling, I guess. And they sort of it's easy to project that into being the next KD or whatever people are, Brandon Ingram or something like that. And he is a very good defender, too, at the point of attack. Off ball, he does leave a lot to be wanted. But at the point of attack, he is one of the best point of attack defenders in this draft. And he would add something to the Magic, because at that point, we could run a switch-heavy scheme because of, Wendell can switch a lot. That's what he did this season. That was the role he played this season. And Jabari does it as well. Although the lack of rim protection that Jabari offers, or doesn't offer, I should say, is kind of worrisome with the fit with Wendell, because ideally you'll want to play Wendell at the level of the screen. And that kind of leaves the rim kind of open because Jabari is very good at that right now, at least. And his off-ball awareness, like I said, does leave me to want more from him.
I think,
however,
okay.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Back to the fit with our team. I feel as though Chet or Jabari would be a signal that our front office really does trust either one of our guards or Franz to handle a whole bunch of usage long-term, because Paolo, he's going to be a usage sponge. He's going to, we've already discussed his offense or whatever. But those two are going to be primarily played off ball. So that would just show me, at least, that our front office has confidence in Franz being our primary or one of our primary creators, or Markel or Suggs. We have a lot of guys who can handle the ball. So that would be that. And one of the things that I do want to see more this season, I'm not sure if I said this earlier, was I want to see more Franz usage because, like I said, the December thing, how he looked awesome. And we kind of like went away from that for some reason.
Mhm.
Like he looked awesome by himself in December. And then when the guards came back, we didn't really go to him that much anymore, when I feel as though he deserved to be able to like rep that kind of stuff out. He deserves more on-ball reps, which is kind of a concern that I have with drafting Paolo because, like I said, we have Suggs, we have Cole. He already struggled playing with those two, like being aggressive with those two, or as aggressive as he was in December with those two. Now we're adding Markel because Markel came at the very, very end of the year. So that's 3 guards now. Then if we were to stack Paolo on top of that, that's another guy who's going to demand the ball a lot. And Franz is just sort of okay with falling into the background. That's just how he's wired. So I'm kind of concerned that he kind of becomes a casualty there. Not saying he's going to be a bad player, but I don't think it might make it more difficult, I should say, for him to reach that upside that I think he has.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're right in sync with you bringing up the guards and Franz as a ball handler because, one thing I've heard from Jabari's defenders is the guard depth wasn't necessarily great at Auburn where he played. And that's not something I really have any context for because I'm not sure who played at Auburn, but I'm sure you have more of a clue about the kind of guards he had to play with. And, what's your thoughts on how he'd kind of fit more with what Orlando has in the backcourt? Do you think that can find something more in his offensive game so he's not strictly taking tough shots? Was that more of a result of Auburn's roster or his shot selection and who he is as a player?
Both, because Jabari's been this guy since he was 15 years old. At U16, that's when the first time I seen him. He's pretty much been that guy for a minute because that's just the kind of shots Jabari takes. Now he makes them. Back then he wasn't making them, so it was looking a little rough. But now he makes them. So, yeah, I feel like we can get him moving off ball a little bit more, and we have more guys who will find him in opportune places off ball than like Wendell Green, which is an Auburn guard. So, I definitely do think he fits in well here from that perspective. We might be the best, or one of the who's in the top 3. We have OKC. We'd probably be the best
Houston.
fit for him. Yeah, we'd probably be the best fit for him, but I'm not really sure if he's our best fit. Because this is going to sound like slander. I really don't want it to. But I feel like if we draft Jabari, he's going to be like our 2nd or 3rd best prospect. And that's the number 1 pick. Well, whereas Chet and Paolo, I feel like they would be our best prospect off the jump. People are projecting like this. This is also going to sound slanderous, and I don't want it to be. People are projecting like Paul George and KD on the Jabari, when in reality, he's probably a little bit closer to, I'm not even going to say a comparison, but let's just say he's closer to like more of a role guy than a superstar creator.
Yeah, I mean, I think Rashard Lewis was the name you mentioned earlier. I also saw that floated by Hoop Intellect. Keandre Hoop Intellect, shout out him.
That's my guy.
He's dope. He does amazing work. He was one of the guys I went to try and prepare for doing this episode. So I think even a player like that, like it definitely provides a lot of value in today's NBA. But I see what you're saying.
For sure.
Or that's not necessarily what you may want first overall. And I kind of think I'd really love for him to end up in Oklahoma City because of, they have SGA who, would be the best guard in this, kind of range for any of these guys to play with. So that, and then Giddey as a passer as well, I think that could really unlock him. And, you're at the point of hopefully eliminating a lot of those tough shots out of his diet.
Right. I agree. Yeah. But I just feel like most of his value will be derived off ball rather than on ball. And that, because I feel like most of his value is going to come, for most people at least is what they're thinking, is going to come as an offensive player and a creator. I don't really see that happening. And I don't really want to invest the 1st overall pick on someone who's not going to be transformative on defense. Like Chet is going to be transformative for potentially, I don't really know. He's going to be potentially transformative for our defense, or he's not going to be transformative for our offense, where Paolo might be. He's sort of like a middle ground where you're not really getting either. And I'm not really okay with that because it's just sort of like we're sitting in a similar enough spot because it's just sort of like we're not getting anything of I don't really know if I'm explaining this very well, but Paolo and Chet are extremes on both ends, and Jabari is more so I wouldn't even say a middle ground, because I guess he is sort of a middle ground because he is awesome at the point of attack. And I don't even want to really compare him to Paolo on the offensive end, because I feel like there is just such a large gap, because Paolo is, this is another thing I wanted to discuss between the prospects. Chet and Jabari seem to have a lot of projection with their handles, whereas Paolo, he is a handler already. So I feel like just small things that just gives Paolo a very large gap over Jabari on the offensive end, and defensively, Chet, same thing. I just feel like Jabari doesn't really, I don't know, I just don't want to spend the number one pick on someone like that, where it's not going to be special on either end.
Well, I was going to ask what your power ranking would be for, a happiness scale for Orlando's draft choice. It sounds like Jabari's at the bottom of that scale right now. And
yeah, definitely.
It's between Chet and Paolo for number 1 and 2.
Yeah, I'd even also going to sound like slander, but if you know me, you know it's not. I just love this other player. I probably wouldn't even have Jabari like third. He'd be like tied for third probably, or very, very, it'll be like it's 3A, 3B with AJ Griffin, because I think AJ is just as good of a shooter. If not, I would say he's better as a shooter. He shot like 45% from three this year, and that matches with his priors from like past competition. And I feel like he has more off the dribble than Jabari does, more realistic. I mean, he has more realistic upside as a handler than Jabari does for me. I feel like he has avenues for offensive stardom that Jabari has not shown us yet. So I would have, but Jabari's defense, AJ's defense, they're kind of night and day right now, although I think AJ's going to be fine in time. But yeah, I'd probably have the 3A, 3B, which is surprising for a lot of people, because like I said, a lot of people have Jabari in number 1 conversations, and I'm like, oh, tier below, and he might not even be the 30 guy for me. But that's not slander either. I'm just that high on AJ. Those guys I'm high on both of them as prospects. I think they're very, very good.
Yeah, I mean, you do great work as a draft analyst. So if you say you're high on AJ Griffin, I'm listening, and I'm definitely going to be looking more into his film for sure.
I'm going to send you a piece on AJ Griffin that my friend PD Webb wrote. It's great. I hope I can get you to drink the Kool-Aid a little bit.
Okay, I mean, yeah, like I said, I trust your words. So when I have a trusted draft analyst guy and he says a guy's a hooper, I'm backing him too. I'm buying stock.
Oh yeah, for sure. A hooper.
Well, I mean, I'm so happy that you had time to make it onto the show. I absolutely needed a Magic fan. It's generally really important for me when I make these videos to get the perspective of people within the fan base, because I just generally think that that's the way that this kind of analysis should happen, because I doubt I watch as many Orlando Magic games as you, and for me to just come out here and put my opinion out there as the definitive record for what the Orlando Magic should do and what Magic fans feel silly. So I'm glad to have had your input. I obviously want to end this by letting you take the floor, because you're a fantastic content creator yourself. I want to let you promote anything that you have in the works, anything that you're planning on releasing, so that people can also go and support that as well.
Okay. Thank you for having me on. I'm one of the 15 Magic fans on Earth, so it's an honor to be our representative on your channel for the draft. So thank you for that. Things I'm working on, as I said earlier, I'm working on some 2020, not this really class stuff. I might do some stuff for the website that I write for the Magic. Shout out to my family at the Close-Up Magic, closeupmagic.com. So they do great things over there. So I might do some draft stuff with them, but I'm not really going to do very much for this class draft-wise, individually. But if you are interested in future classes, high school, that kind of stuff, then give me a follow at notzay22, NOTZAY 22, like the numbers 22. And my YouTube, if you want to subscribe there, I have 2. One's Not Zay Hoops, and the other one is just Not Zay. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't think I have anything else to promote.
Okay, I mean, well, hopefully we'll be bringing you back in next year's draft when you guys land the first overall pick, and we're talking about Victor Wembanyama going to the Orlando Magic now
Yes,
as well.
sir.
Just gonna speaking that into the future. I mean, when it comes to generational big man talent, or the Orlando Magic are gonna get the first overall pick. So
Right.
that it seems like that's just how things go in the NBA.
And Vic might be like the best big man prospect since like Tim Duncan or something. It's wild what he can do.
Yeah, he looks bad. Regardless, I might have to have you back to talk about him next draft cycle for sure. But I said, I appreciate you making the time. Thank you, the audience, for listening in. If you're still here, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and absolutely go support Zay on everything that he does. Go follow him on every platform he's on as well. Thank you for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Peace.